Hi, my name's Daisy. Well, not really Daisy, that's just for this podcast. But I'm not an actor. I am actually a young person with my own experiences of foster care, and I wanted to share something from my point of view. This week's podcast is sponsored by Fostering UK. I've been living with Fostering UK foster carers for several years, and now I'm 18, I've chosen to stay on with them because they're my family. I think people sometimes forget that young people notice a lot more than adults realise. We see what's happening around us, we know when our carers are supported, and we know when they're stressed or struggling. I've seen firsthand the difference it makes when foster carers are properly supported by the people around them. The support I've had, especially with my mental health, has made a huge difference, and I know that's because my carers have had the right support too. So if you're a foster carer who doesn't feel supported, or you're thinking about fostering and want to know you'll be treated properly and professionally, I'd say it's worth looking at Fostering UK. The details of where they cover and how to get in touch are in the show notes.
Hello and welcome back to Foster Care Uncovered. It's episode number 29, soon to a lovely, curvy round number. Next one. It's lovely to have you here, as always, to our fellow foster carers, wonderful social workers, and now increasing members of other professional agency and sectors that are listening to us, and government officials. Hello there, you. It's so lovely to have you on board as well. Wonderful to join us. So,
how are you today, Louise?
How am I? I am fully fledged foster carer at the moment. I'm dealing with a lot going on for the children I care for, so I haven't slept much.
No.
We have all sorts of police involved. We have lots of issues. This is the reality of foster care. So when
I know, and that's what we spoke about before we came on, wasn't it? And also what we spoke about is something terribly important, was that we have an obligation to safeguarding. And there are some times that we know that it's going to cause a lot of trouble for everybody, for children. We know it's not trouble, but, it's going to cause challenges, issues. We know what... But, it's really, really important that as a foster carer, what stays with you is you have no choice. If it's a serious safeguarding issue, it gets immediately reported. And I think that that's an important thing for people to hold. We have no choice.
Safeguarding safeguarding is not inconvenient. Safeguarding is black and white, and now. There is never, you don't, that saying, like, if you feel that you're worried that you might have cancer, you don't walk to the doctors, you run. And so when I said we're involved with the police, it's not about the children, they are innocent. About other parties. So this is life of a foster carer, and
Collie, isn't it? Just
carry on throughout the day as usual. Business is normal. We have to work, we have to look after other children and tend our lives. So if you ever think that we're not foster carers, it's not true.
No, I mean, I'm not fostering currently, but I went through 16 years of it. I know exactly what you're going through. I had a slightly serious problem this week. After last week, we're talking about the bleenies.
Oh, the bleenies.
Yeah, so I decided that I would treat myself and my husband to some bleenies from Waitrose. Well, and get them delivered in our weekly shop. And I thought, I just want to feel that specialness. I want to feel like I'm inside the Westminster bubble, even in my little farmhouse in Hampshire. So I ordered the bleenies. I was like, oh.
Did you buy the caviar, lumpfish?
Well, I didn't do that as well. I stretched to the bleenies. Anyway, Waitrose have this policy that when they deliver to you, if they can't find the exact thing they want, they find the nearest substitute.
Yes.
So when they arrived, I was waiting for my blinis to be unpacked. And he said, I'm sorry, we didn't have any blinis, so we've made a substitution. You know what they were?
What?
Sausage rolls.
That just sums it all up. That's made my day.
So
okay. Not quite.
I didn't send the sausage rolls back. I thought, well, I'll eat them and pretend they're blinis. Save me money.
Cream cheese and a little bit of salmon and
I didn't
fish on top.
No Pole Roger or Whispering Angel from Provence, as I don't actually drink. I haven't drunk for 30 years because, let's face it, can you imagine me on alcohol?
Yes, and I don't think I'd want to be in the same room. Do you know, Whispering Angels sounds like a really good therapeutic company, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
Whispering Angels here. Would you like to fill out this pub quiz form and tell me all about your life? Then I will cast no help whatsoever and tell you how you scored. We are Whispering Angels.
Oh dear. On that note, I think you
can tell I haven't had much sleep.
So anyway, I have tried to recover after my extremely first world problem.
Yeah, first world problem.
I just make it just a bit of light-hearted nonsense. So quote of the week, I think you've got one.
Oh yes, I've got this one. Right, okay, so quote of the week. I love this. We love the podcast so much. It's like, have I got news for you? Foster care edition. Well, Sarah, I don't know about you, but I'm going to take that.
I love it.
Cast us as funny. Which one are you?
Yeah, I love it, especially as I love that program.
I love that program too. Yeah. So that is the greatest compliment you could ever pay us. Thank you so much. Because we're deadly serious, but the subject we talk about is deadly serious.
Yes,
Sarah,
isn't it?
Go on.
Well, I wanted to raise something important before we get into the main body of things, because we are bringing things to light that many would rather we didn't. And boy, today is probably the biggest subject when it comes to that. But some are suggesting doing what we do is ruining recruitment. I would like to point out, however, that it was ruined a long time before we came along.
Long time ago.
However, whenever we talk honestly about the challenges within fostering, there is always a risk that people hear criticism and assume that means we are criticising fostering itself. And that really isn't what this podcast is about. This isn't an argument against fostering. In fact, it comes from completely the opposite place. We believe fostering is one of the most important things that exists in society, and we love it. We believe in fostering, but we believe that means being honest about it. The truth is, for many people, I think the reality of fostering is so very different from the picture they were given when they first started. All those adverts talk about changing a life, being part of a team, making a difference. All of that can be true, but what they don't talk about is everything else that comes with it. And they don't talk about the complexity of navigating a system with its own language, its processes, expectations, and huge problems. They don't talk about the emotional impact, the pressure on family life. You know, the responsibility that kind of follows you home every single day. Well, it doesn't follow you home, does it? It's there in your home every day. Or the fact that sometimes you have to learn how to advocate for yourself as much as you have to advocate for the children in your care. But I really want to pass this is not anti-fostering message. What do you say, Louise?
We're not here to put people off fostering. That's absolutely definite. Quite the opposite. We need good foster carers so badly it should count as a national emergency. What we're here to stop is people finding out what fostering really involves 3 placements in and 1 nervous breakdown later. Because right now, we're okay-ish at recruitment. Well, it should be after the amount of money they've chucked at it, and shockingly bad at retention. Mostly because nobody tells people what it actually is until they're already living it. This was never just about getting carers through the door. It's about keeping them once they're in and able, about being stable and providing loving homes with as little disruption to children as possible. Knowledge, my dear friends, is protection. And, my dear friends, information is freedom. Knowing your rights, knowing the process, knowing when something doesn't feel right, knowing how to get support. That isn't an extra skill on top of being a foster carer. And let's all be honest, skills to foster is pretty lean. That is what's going to be a good foster carer looks like. A foster carer feels informed, confident, and valued. That isn't a nice to have. They are the stability a child actually needs. So it's not an extra, it's what makes a good foster carer.
Well
Okay,
said.
thank you very much. Can we go on to my favourite bit now? This always makes me giggle. Wow. Well, word salad corn.
Well, I just like to butt in there because I've put a little
What
extra
you?
thing
What
in
in?
there. Well, I'm in a butting in mood after my Bellini experience. I wanted to just say something about we haven't mentioned them for a while, or I haven't mentioned them for a while, about the fostering network's latest. Well, I would just call it a publicity stunt because the popularity is waning, and they're doing these sort of publicity stunts to show their concerned side, their listening side. They're raising issues that we've known for decades, and they've known for decades, but suddenly they're all over them. So I watched this recent video on their Facebook page where one of the senior leaders is interviewing a foster carer about how foster carers shouldn't be spoken down to. That's the title of the video. Foster carers should not be spoken down to. But I have to admit, it made me smile because I know a bit of history there. And the person that was it was a senior leader at the fostering network, only been there about a year, who was doing the head on one side and the genuine listening and, oh gosh, that's terrible. But before joining the fostering network, that person was working as fostering manager of one of the southern regions, one of the biggest private equity agencies. And I have to say, she wasn't overly popular. And please, let's remember, this isn't about me hating on her or social work bashing. This is about a point, not a person. Okay, let me really make that very clear. Now, one comment was sent to me that was screenshotted it before the fostering network swiftly deleted it. Okay, and this was it. This is super interesting to watch. This lady was the head of the fostering agency we were with, and done absolutely nothing to support us as carers after an operations manager in a meeting told me and my husband that foster carers are the lowest of the low when it comes to real day-to-day care of the children in their care. Funny how things change. And somebody's replied, and now she works for the fostering network. That says it all.
Oh my God.
Now, I'm only repeating what's been said. I'm not making any of this up. I have the screenshot. These are the things I keep pointing out about. And why do I pick on the fostering network? Because they are so influential over our role and the control of us. They are a right-hand man, right-hand side of the government, of the minister. They lobby and they make sure that the control stays the same. And these are the kind of people they employ. Not that that person might be not brilliant, lovely person in her own right. That's not the point here. I keep bashing that home, or I get, oh, you're putting, it's not a personal thing. It's an illustration of what's going on there. So, but it's bigger than that, Louise, this one, because for me, this lady was one of the senior fostering managers in Hampshire during the Modernising Placements programme, and I was there. That programme wasn't just a few tweaks around the edges. It proposed major changes to the way foster carers were paid and recognised. The stated aim was to modernise the service and reduce reliance on independent agencies and making Hampshire more competitive. But from where we were sitting as foster carers, many of us knew the proposals would do exactly the opposite. Sound familiar?
Yes.
The most experienced carers, the people caring for the children with the highest levels of need, felt they were about to be devalued. We repeatedly explained what the consequences would be. We weren't trying to protect our wallets. We were trying to protect the stability for the children. Were we listened to? No. So the local fostering association wasn't challenging it. In fact, many carers, it was felt, had become far too close to management. So we and that actually, funnily enough, Hampshire have now disassociated themselves from that fostering association. So we organised ourselves. Well, I did, It only recently I've become involved with the union, and I was chair at the time, but it was very, very recent. And we held huge meetings, hundreds of foster carers turned up. Then, after we'd had all our meetings, senior management, including this lady, were, invited to join us. We made one thing very, very clear. If Hampshire pushed ahead with these changes, many of the country's counties' most experienced carers would leave. Some would move to IFAs. Others had said they would stop fostering altogether. That wasn't a threat. It was the reality. Management finally realised the numbers didn't add up. You cannot reduce your reliance on agencies by driving away the very carers you're relying on. I mean, and this programme would cost them millions. Eventually, Hampshire changed course. And the level threes, the model stayed exactly the same. The council reports acknowledged that retaining and strengthening an advanced structure supported recruitment, retention, and placement stability, exactly what we'd been arguing all along, okay? Now, when I see someone sitting sympathetically in front of a camera, nodding with a head on one side, whilst the carer talks about not being listened to, I can't help thinking, where was that listening when hundreds of Hampshire carers were saying exactly the same thing? Because listening and tilting your head and looking concerned, it just isn't the same thing. Mind you, here's the irony, Louise, I think that we did Hampshire a huge favour, actually, because if these proposals had gone through, I genuinely believe Hampshire would have lost so many of its experienced carers. Instead, they retained that expertise, strengthened the level 3 pathway, and the authority has since highlighted recruitment and retention improvements. Sometimes the people challenging an organisation aren't its enemies. And we saw it in Devon. Hampshire became outstanding. What happened in Devon, they went ahead with it all, and then they have had to recently make public apologies to foster carers. But what this goes back to is, why the fostering network recently and continually hiring people like that? But to support us, this is the problem. It's fine if they want to do that. They work for the local authorities, they work for the agencies, they work for the children. But don't claim you're supporting foster carers and then do this trick on us. What do you think?
I think it's very weird, Sarah. I've been sitting here. I didn't know that was coming.
No, you didn't.
And I'm slightly horrified by all of that. It says to me that there are these wild cards in all the providers, local authorities and the independent providers, and they move around, don't they? They move around because they rearrange the deck chairs and they all hop on to another, organization. It happens in this sector, it happens in the charity sector, it happens in education too, in universities and schools. They just hop about. And with that, people learn the sound bites that people want to hear. People usually recruit people that are like themselves. That tends to be a very organization. So if an organization has a particular leadership style or a culture within an organization, they tend to only appoint people that will stay on message. What I find interesting though is because of the absolute crisis that we're in with fostering, is that again we're talking about, as I have occasionally talked about, if I were an organization and I invested in my branding, which is my message, and if I invested not just money but my thinking into the brand, none of that is on brand, is it? Because is your brand to be hostile to the very people who you are trying to recruit, retain, and get to do the work you urgently need them to do? So this feels like a bit of a Frankenstein's monster, which is what happens to organizations when they do not have an identity. They might have an identity in their color scheme, but the internal culture doesn't have a clear identity. And they become blind to the optics of the outside world, and they become bubble think. And if those organizations tend to kind of exist around government, like the London bubble, which is why I think Andy Burnham is right to smash it up a little bit and speckle it across the country, because it will keep a kind of fresh blood coming through. But it feels like an old boys network. It feels like mates employing mates. And when you talk about that head on the side, I remember when I was at the university, we had an HR lady who we all used to dread coming to meetings, because she would do that false empathy look where she put her head on one side and went, ah. And you know it was fake, you know it was theatre. And it just feels like providers are turning themselves literally into Frankenstein's monsters, because they say one thing, do another, look like this, present like that. They don't seem to have an on-brand message. And that's what I think is going to break them all up and break them down. And I think the organizations that think about their branding ensure that their teams of staff treat foster carers with respect are going to be the ones that clean up when it comes to recruitment, because nothing gets round faster than the way you are with your staff and your organization. We can talk about that from big companies like Sports Direct, Amazon. Word gets out very fast about a department or a business or an organization that does not treat its workers well. And we are workers at the end of the day. We're a huge workforce, and that is their denial. And I think what you're going to find again and again as we go through this work is that the old ego, the unchecked ego of people, is hostile to the very people that they need to be working for. If I were a leader of an organization like that, they would be out on their ear, because they would be affecting the brand and affecting the reputation of the organization for which I was working very hard to develop.
Very, very well said. Considering I sprung that on you. I sprung that on you. I absolutely agree. For me as well, that very, very simple ideal for me is, and this is why we've built our own organizations like Foster Wiki over the years, and the unions, because you can't have social workers, especially when we go into this further on into this episode, you cannot have social workers running a support organization for foster carers. Not at the moment. It's just not possible.
No.
So,
No.
Shall we move on to Word Salad Corner?
Yes. Oh, I love Word Salad Corner. Welcome to another edition of Word Salad Corner, where we rescue perfectly good thoughts from the academic dressing aisle before they go off. Sarah.
Louise, we haven't done, we will return next week to the naughty step. We've missed out the naughty step. So much you can do, isn't there? Right, well, I found an absolute corker for Word Salad Corner this week, and I've had to just glue my teeth in today because I don't know if I'm going to get through it. On LinkedIn, of course. Where else would you find such a sentence that requires a cup of tea and a lie down, and possibly a PhD just to get the end of it? Now, don't get me wrong. I love words. I love writing. You know that. I love beautifully crafted sentences that make you stop and think. But this, it's just plain unnecessary, because when your idea needs a linguistic obstacle course before anyone can understand it, you haven't elevated the thinking. You just hidden it behind a thesaurus. Real tragedy? Somewhere underneath the 47 syllables, the academic jargon, somewhere, it is sadly, because many good ideas get trapped inside bad writing, don't they? The academic jargon, the carefully arranged intellectual confetti, there might actually be a very simple point trying to escape. So let's have a look at this. I can't get through this in one go, you know that. Right, this was on LinkedIn. Traditional measurement is grounded in logical positivism and thus focuses on seeking to structure observations consistently. Contextual factors are seen as a threat to the validity of measurement. Communometrics is grounded in reality. It's not even commas enough. Communometrics is grounded in reality philosophies and focuses on the need to decontextualize complex phenomenon to reveal comparable metrics. Culture, development, and interventions in place must all be decontextualized. Oh my God. But we sometimes forget that time is also contextually dependent, and common metrics require it to be decontextualized. No points for writing decontextualized so many times. Translated, I think he meant to say, to make fair comparisons, researchers often remove the messy bits of life. The trouble is, the messy bits are often the most important bits. So why don't you just say that? Or do you think academics charge by the syllable?
Oh, I worked in that environment for 23 years, and I can honestly say
It's just extraordinary, that one.
I used to sit there and listen to utter tosh, and then I had this window cleaner called Pete who would get to the nub of a situation in about 5 minutes. By the time he's at the top of the ladder to get down, he completely got the world summed up. And I would see constantly funding rivals and applications for funding bids to go in and get research to do what Pete said in 5 minutes. So here's what strikes me: the messier the language, the harder it becomes to hold anyone to account for what it actually means. And that's really important there, because that's deliberate. You can't challenge a decision if nobody, including the person who wrote it, can tell you in plain English what it says. Plain language isn't a style preference, and this is a really important thing, and this is what we want our foster carers and social workers to understand. If you cannot understand what is being said to you or is written in front of you, if you generally cannot understand, it's not an admittance that you are a dimwit. It is raising an awareness of something really prolific, and that is in this sector. That is a safeguarding issue. If you do not understand the content of a sentence that is primarily around children and about the work we do, if you do not understand it, that it's immediately a safeguarding issue. It has to be understandable.
Yeah, and well, anyway, yeah.
What a load of toss.
But it's just, you know what it is? It's just so inauthentic. It's just... Anyway, should we go to a break?
I'm going for lie down, actually, because that's completely...
Do you want to go for a lie down in our break?
I want to go for lie down, because that was such a load of rubbish, honestly. I find, as a writer, I find it insulting to the word
It
community.
is insulting, yeah, it is insulting. And I love the way the great and the good jump on the post as though they really get what he's saying, and it's so important. It's like, oh, go away.
They just want their name next to something that looks clever, and that's such a stupid thing to do.
It is. Right, let's go to a break now. And after the break, we are coming back to are social workers too powerful and what unchecked power does to ordinary people. So we'll see you after the break. Hi everybody, Sarah here. This is an advert for Foster Wiki. Now, every single day, carers are reaching out to us on a helpline, many experiencing difficult situations or issues, all of them and all of you carrying the enormous responsibility for children who've experienced trauma. Now, they contact us for lots of different reasons, but honestly, we can help with nearly everything. And the most important thing, of course, is we've walked 1,000 miles in your shoes. Foster Wiki was founded not as an organisation, a charity or a profit-making anything. It was founded by carers for carers because we knew what you needed. Our people are all experts in all the things they need to be experts in, apart from fostering, you know, safeguarding systems, legislation, etc. The whole 9 yards. So we keep carers caring. We work with you so that you can keep caring. Join today and experience the kind of support that you did not even know existed. Trust me. The link is in the show notes, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Thank you. Bye. Welcome back, everybody. We actually got this quote this morning from somebody who's a very high, one of the most highly regarded professionals in another sector, who also is a foster carer. Okay. This section's going to be about what happens when power goes unchecked, because even good people can misuse it. And thousands of foster carers tell us the same point. Sorry, at what point does this pattern become a problem? So we'll start with this before I go on. This is what this person sent me this morning. And I'm always very happy, by the way, for the powers that be out there who want me to, share who wrote these comments. I can give you evidence of who did them, and obviously after I've asked for permission, but it's important that we don't write these ourselves. Social workers are investigators, judges, and executioners all at once. With no legal training, they have the power to infringe on people's human rights with impunity and without scrutiny. Their understanding that they are untouchable only fuels their arrogance of power. There is an unsustainable power imbalance between foster carers and social workers. So that's pretty strong. So this episode is going to be controversial. In fact, I know some people will immediately become defensive before they even heard the full conversation. But Foster Care Uncovered has always been about bringing difficult issues into the light, because we cannot fix what we refuse to acknowledge. So before I go any further, I really wanted to be clear about that. This is not an attack on every social worker. That would be unfair, inaccurate, and frankly lazy. There are thousands of social workers out there who care deeply and work incredibly hard, and who are trying to make a difference for children and families every single day. Okay. And I'll add there as well that you and I are the first people to admit that there are some terrible foster carers out there. So we're not just picking on social workers. We're making we're bringing an important issue to light here. Okay. There is something that we need to have the courage to talk about. For years, foster carers, adopters, kinship carers, and birth families, and you and I have seen a real increase across all the platforms, because you and I look at the other platforms. We look at adoption, we look at kinship care, we look at the birth parents, families. They're hard to look at, but they are important to look at. So this is not one or two people, not isolated complaints, thousands of people from completely different backgrounds across different parts of the country in very, very different settings, who often have different relationships with the care system, but their experiences and what they're saying are remarkably similar. One thing we have to speak about is that thousands of times on social media and in groups amongst carers and others is how this unchecked power gives some the power to rewrite the truth. Now, they talk across social media, they talk about being unheard, dismissed, patronized, bullied, professionals don't listen, who misuse power, and who write reports that are not inaccurate. And to be honest, that's quite generous at times. And they don't always tell the truth. So yes, there, I've said it. Now, before anyone says it, yes, of course, some people will have grievances that are based on misunderstanding, emotion, or their own interpretation of events. Every system will have those. Human beings are complicated. But when thousands of people are saying exactly the same thing repeatedly over decades, it becomes incredibly difficult to dismiss them all as angry or crazies or just keyboard warriors. And let's face it, that response is something we need to examine as well. What do you think?
This is an interesting one, isn't it? And one that affects every one of us. Professionals, well, we are professionals, isn't it? Because systems protect themselves the way people do. We all protect ourselves by attacking the messenger instead of reading the message. So instead of asking, why are so many people telling us this? The reflex is, these people don't understand the system. They're angry. They don't like being challenged. Sometimes that's true of one person. It is never true of thousands. When foster carers, adopters, kinship carers, birth parent groups who frequently don't agree with each other, let's be honest, start describing the exact same experience, that isn't a coincidence, that is important data. This isn't about retreating every complaint as gospel. It's about asking the one honest question left in the room. Why does the same pattern keep appearing across completely different people in completely different parts of the country year after year? And what does that tell us about what happens when one profession holds enormous power and the people affected by it hold almost none? And I have been, as I always do, I look at all the platforms, and birth parents sometimes are very negative about foster carers and vice versa. But on this, there is now becoming patterns that are very, very clear about the abuse of power.
Yeah. And the same kind of words spring up all the time. And I think, well, we'll go into this, going into this thing. This is a two-parter. Because we won't have time in our new time frame to get through all 4 sections. But for the future, for next week as well, we're going to talk about, this week we're going to talk about how power can change people and the psychology of unchecked authority. And we're going to talk about when you hold the power to define the truth, how dangerous that can be. Then if we get time, we'll do some more, but we're probably going into next week. We're going to be doing, does power create a culture where the truth becomes flexible? And the cost of that unchecked power on carers, children, adopters, kinship carers, birth families, etc. So I'll start here with how power can change people. And what's really, really important is how unchecked power, because what we find all the time as foster carers is there seems to be no accountability. If you want to complain about a social worker, first of all, you tend to keep quiet because you get an allegation against you. Secondly, you could try the complaints process, but they all investigate themselves. And thirdly, the ombudsman, that kind of, it's all useless, but that it's going nowhere. There is nobody outside that says, oh, did somebody actually do that? Let's have a look at it, because they mark their own homework. So the reason I wanted to start with the issue of power is because we often talk about safeguarding failures as though they happen because of bad individuals. We look for someone to blame, someone who made the wrong decision, someone who didn't do something they should have done. But psychology tells us something more uncomfortable. Power itself changes human behavior. The question isn't whether someone starts out as a good person. The question is what happens when they're placed in a position where their judgment carries more weight, where they are not regularly challenged, and where the consequences for getting things wrong are limited to nil. I think that, this, we know as well from, sounds a bit extreme, but we know from the Stanford prison thing, Lord of the Experiment, Lord of the Flies, Animal Farm, all this is a very, very cultural norm, this unchecked power. But I think it's seriously harming retention. And by that, it's seriously harming recruitment because of now and it's, can't get away with it. Social media rules the world. And if you notice, there is a real correlation between retention, the great fall of retention and recruitment, and the rise of social media, because carers are happy to speak out about what's happening to them. So unless we get this into the light, we show it to everyone, we have a good look at it, we say, well, what can we do? So what about you? What sort of talking points have you got?
This is, well, I was thinking about this a lot because I think I thought to myself, well, nobody wakes up and decides to misuse their power for the fun of it. And then I thought, or do they? Because when I was teaching, I was teaching at a university for, a long time, 2 decades, over 2 decades. And we had this observation, and this observation has been shared with me with people in the NHS, and people in education and other sectors, and social workers that who are my friends. And that is that you can promote brilliant teachers. Brilliant teachers. This is our experience. Really, people who are really good at working with students, people who are really good at understanding the process of teaching, the pedagogy. Promote them to management, and they're a disaster. And then they become a disaster because they find themselves squeezed between two worlds. That is, they got it from above, and they have to now tell on the people from below and tell about them. And I wonder whether power, it does go unchecked. And this is how it works for any of us, isn't it? What actually happens is quiet and far more dangerous than the obvious, walking into a room and going, I want to change everything. Power breeds omnipotence. Not the cartoon villain kind, the everyday kind, a creeping confidence that your judgment is just simply correct because you said it is, because you've been given the little badge that says you know, whether you do or not. And you can't look like you don't know because the people above and the people below are judging you. And I find most of the problems happen in middle management, Sarah. I don't know about you. A shrinking tolerance for being challenged, until disagreements look like a difference of opinion starts to look like opposition. So people who previously were able to talk to you and felt comfortable about talking to you, that is keeping things in check. You've seen that as opposition now. So you get defensive. Not only do you get defensive, if you make mistakes, you don't want to be found out. So now you look for gaps in the system to hide. And once you find those gaps, you've opened up a whole new universe where you can do different practice, maybe not good practice, and get away with it. So when you're surrounded by people who reinforce your authority instead of testing it, because everyone in power, as we see globally, surround themselves with little yes noddy people because they want something from you. They want your job. They seek favor. So it takes a brave person, an honest person to keep you in check. And criticism isn't your enemy. Good criticism helps you grow, helps you improve. It stops those managers and those people being reflective. Why would you reflect when nobody's asking you to? Because they're scared to. The danger was never one bad apple, Sarah. The danger is a barrel of apples that never checks itself. So you have that manager repeated in lots of different departments, and then you have a culture. So I've seen it, you get heads of services, heads of children's services who talk about safeguarding, become the chair of the independent safeguarding panel. How does that work? You are literally marking your own homework. So the gaps, I think what is interesting in the abuse of power is that the people who abuse the power simply find the gaps within the system to hide.
They do. I absolutely agree. And if it's there, who wouldn't use it, especially when your job might depend on it? I think that, the problem is that on the front line, that turns into a completely different thing for foster carers who have no rights, no protections, no security, very little right to rectification. I mean, we have a system at FosterWiki where we've got a page, your right to rectification. They have a right to rectification, but then we have the allegation system that can just get rid of somebody in a flash anyway if they do start to ask for the right to rectification. And what are we missing? Challenge, accountability, independent scrutiny, consequences when standards are not met. And just remember, I'm going through with a fine-tooth comb the new fostering quality standards, which are in draft at the moment, and replacing the national minimum standards. And whilst I absolutely take my hat off to the DfE policy department, they have listened and they've really changed the language, and they've really put so many important things in there if you asked. And I feel sorry for them because I'm still reading it going, what's the point? Because there are no consequences when those standards are not met. We've got a system that says trust professionals because they are professional, but it's not enough, because those professionals are still human beings with unchecked power. So I guess that takes us on to, this is the big one, isn't it? This is the big one. And this is the one that gets out on social media the most. When you hold the power to define the truth, and I'm define the truth, we're avoiding one word, aren't we, here, because it's too controversial, it's too difficult, but I'll say it: lying. So I will not mention it again, but this is the word, that is how this power to define the truth gets said on social media by universally thousands of people. Now, one of the most powerful things anyone can hold is not just the ability to make decisions, it's the ability to define what happened. And this is where fostering becomes particularly important. It becomes particularly important because social workers do not just make decisions. They create records, they write assessments, they form professional opinions that can influence how everyone else sees a foster carer. And when one person's interpretation becomes the official version of events, that creates enormous power. Louise, both of you and I have experienced this. We're not just talking here about the thousands and thousands. I've experienced it across the board because I have spent my entire last 16 years supporting foster carers, thousands of them in different guises, different organisations, and now in FosterWiki. And this is a huge, huge issue.
It is. And in fostering, the written word is our currency, isn't it? A social worker doesn't make a decision. They write the version of events that everyone else will read instead of living it. So we've all been there. You either on the phone or you've emailed them, or they're sitting in your kitchen opposite you, and you're telling them something. You're telling them something, and there is no record of that. You're telling them something, and what they they write their version of events that everyone else will read, and instead of living it, they will just report it, and it goes to managers, it goes to the panels, it goes to agencies, to every future decision made about you as a carer, long after the meeting itself has been forgotten. And what do carers tell us again and again, Sarah? That the report doesn't match what happened. And my goodness, me and my husband have been in that position so many times and challenged it. That context goes missing. That's an assumption, gets typed up and filed as a fact. When one person's interpretation becomes the official record, that isn't an opinion anymore. That's power dressed up as fact, and that is the abuse. And it can be resolved by some very good training about how to write facts, not opinions.
I agree, but I'm going to butt in there. Sorry, I'm going to push back here. Just say, I totally agree with that. But there comes a point, and if we don't say this, it doesn't do justice to thousands of carers out there. There comes a point where they put things in that are made up.
Yeah, they do.
I know that we're trying to be generous here and say it's their version of what their opinion, they're writing it as. They just will make things up. And I've seen it 1,000 times. And then try as you might to push back against that, get things rectified. Carers never get these things rectified. They sit on their records forever. And there is so much fabrication.
I think just in my own experience, and when I've sort of dipped in and out of the foster wiki world and helped foster carers, what I find so alarming is the blatant lying, the blatant construction of non-truths. And you can't, and they become the fact because the social worker is believed more than the foster carer. Their truth becomes the truth, where the foster carer's truth doesn't seem to matter. The foster carer is perceived as a liar. And I think this all goes down to back to the status, is that because foster carers are in a kind of void, aren't we? We're in a vacuum when it comes to who we are and our status and what we are and where our rights are. We're constantly swimming around trying to find a dinghy that says you're safe here, but we can never quite find one. So I think it's totally exploitative of the fact that they have more power because they have a job, a title, and all the benefits that go with employment. And as I touched on earlier, being a good social worker does not necessarily make you a good manager. And I've seen that happen a lot. And I think that is a failing of the morality, perhaps, of an organization that doesn't invest in training managers. Because are you an organization that is transparent and honest and trying to do good work for the children? Because ultimately, the way you treat your foster carers is what you think of the children. Or are you an organization that has a history of not telling the truth and making facts up, where therefore your whole existence now is about protecting yourself? So you are an organization of protectionism. Those organizations, we can smell them, we know who they are, we know what they are terrifying because they will literally try and kill you. It feels like they're after your blood to protect themselves. And I think, let's not, and I don't mean to shrink the seriousness of what's going on, but I do think that you can adapt culture by making people aware of what of what they are doing. And perhaps some social workers do not genuinely realize that they are in the culture and they're aiming to please, because I think a lot of social workers are abused as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I think that for me touches on something else that I think is a huge, huge problem in social services. There's a sort of pack culture.
Yeah.
And I think many social workers probably are led to, we know several, don't we, are led to go along with it, and led to go along with sometimes a rather unpalatable narrative that goes on in social work offices about foster carers. And there will be social workers listening to that who know that's true. We've got a lot of examples of those. We just haven't brought them to the fore. I think what's really important before we wrap up here is to say that, again, this is not attacking all social workers, but we're saying that this is a problem we can no longer ignore. And it raises really uncomfortable questions. Does this level of power create a situation where professionals have become overly confident that their version of events will be automatically accepted? And that's not because every social worker is dishonest, but because systems influence behaviour. Their confidence that their interpretation is the truth, confidence that disagreement means the other person is wrong, confidence that the system will ultimately always support their version. And we know that, don't we, from panels, from thousands and thousands of panels. It's part of the really, really crucial thing about allegations, and the totally disproportionate amount of allegations brought against foster carers and anybody else in the sector or teaching or social work, anything. despite us being assessed more than anybody, and we'll get onto that next week, because actually we're assessed for our psychological, not that they're always that competent in doing that or qualified to do it, but they look back over our childhoods, our psychology, things that affect us, things that affect what we say. None of that happens in social work. And that frame of reference that a social worker has, it's never challenged, is it?
Well, and I need to bring something else to the fore here. When I worked in universities, I had friends in many universities in my area, and one of the most startling facts was that I was told by a head of social work at one particular university, who told me that they have student social workers who go unchecked onto their course. They recruit whoever it is who wants to join. And when they became cautious about those students, they had concerns about those students, whether they felt that they might even be predatory to children, whether they felt they might be totally incompetent. They were not allowed to remove those students from the courses. They had to put them on the courses because of the fees. So this comes down to, we don't check this often enough, but what is the curriculum and what is the process for student social workers? We don't even go there. And it might be worth getting someone on here to talk about that. But being told that they had deep concerns about students.
That's terrible. And
Yep.
it really is. I mean, I think that this assessment of who you are, the self, that sort of kind of assessment is completely missing with social work, because they will be operating from their own opinions, unconscious bias, their own frame of reference. Now, when you're a foster carer, unfortunately, it doesn't happen enough, but we're trying to push for this hugely. It all begins with you. And if you, and the amount of discrimination we hear from social workers to foster carers, that can be whether about religion, sexuality, all the gender things. It can be about race, heritage. There are some terrible horror stories out there from social workers with unflexible opinions and no conscious awareness of those opinions. That's something maybe we can get into next week, because I think we need to wrap up. Have you got a last word on that?
Yeah, just that, none of this, what we talk about, means stripping social workers of their authority. Far from it. Children need skilled social workers. That was never the question. What they need is authority that comes with accountability, transparency, independent challenge, and actual consequences when things go wrong. So here's the question the sector needs to ask, not us. Have they built a system that trusts people with power, but doesn't protect the people the power is used upon?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think they have. I think the answer to that is they have. Now, anyone listening, that's a great question. Have we created a system that trusts people with power, but doesn't sufficiently protect the people affected by that power? Can you please write into info@fosterwiki.com and message me, message Louise. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us. Let us know what you think so we can bring it into part 2 next week. Part 2 is going to be very interesting, because we're going to be talking about, when power creates a culture where the truth becomes flexible, and the cost of this unchecked power, who loses out and who gains. So thank you, everybody. Bit serious there at the end, but this is a really important subject. And I know a lot of carers will be nodding at the podcast, and a lot of social workers too, probably. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me, sending lots of love as always. Take
Lovely. Care. And please share the podcast, share it far and wide, because the numbers are unbelievable. Bye, everybody.
Bye.